Alright, welcome back. So in this video we're just going to revise your equations again. So the most important thing to remember when it comes to equations is that you get two types of equations. You get what we call your linear equations, where you just have a normal x. So your x doesn't have a exponent like to the power of 2 or to the power of 3. It's just a normal x or just a normal a to the exponent 1. So that is when you have a linear equation. When you have a quadratic equation, it means your x is to the power of 2. So the way we solve a linear equation differs from the way we solve a quadratic equation. So let's look at number 1 first. So in number 1, I only have an x. There's no x squared, no x to the power of 3, it's just a normal x. Therefore, this has to be a linear equation. Alright, so how do we solve a linear equation? So I just want to rewrite it quickly. It's 2x minus 8 equals to 14. So when you have a linear equation, it means all the numbers has to go to the one side, all your letters to the other side, and then you have to get your x alone. Alright, so the first thing we have to take over is this minus 8. And when I take that over, it becomes 2x equals to 14 plus 8. Remember, whenever you take something over the equation sign, the sign itself changes. So you're doing the inverse function. So if you minus on the one side, you're going to add on the other side. If you multiply on the one side, you're going to divide on the other side. If you add it on the one side and you take it over, you're going to subtract on the other side. So we always do the inverse function as soon as we go across my equation sign. Alright, so now I have 2x is equal to 14 plus 8, and that will give me 22. Now the next thing I have to get rid of is this 2. Now remember, 2x is the same thing as 2 times x. Therefore, if I want to take this 2 over, and I'm doing the inverse function, I'm going to have to say it's 22 divided by 2, which gives me x is equal to 11. Right, that was quite a simple one. So this is what we call a linear function. Now let's have a look at number 2. So when I have a quadratic function, it means that I either have to factorize or things have already been factorized. So in a question where you get brackets, alright, so I have x minus 4 in a bracket, x plus 4 in a bracket equals to 0. If you only have brackets and your right hand side is equal to 0, it means this thing has already been factorized. So if you go and you multiply out your brackets and you go to the next step where you have to factorize again, you're going to get exactly what is already given to you here and here. Alright, so when you get an equation like this with 2 brackets or 3 brackets and it's equal to 0, it means it has already been factorized. So all you're now going to do is you're going to take your first bracket, which was x minus 7, and you're going to put it equal to 0. Or, remember the word or in between, you're going to take your second bracket and put it equal to 0. So that means I can take over my 7, when I get x 0 plus 7, which is obviously equal to 7. Or I have to take over my x plus 4, so my plus 4, and when it goes over, the inverse function is going to happen, so 0 minus 4, so x is equal to negative 4. Alright, so that means I have 2 answers. 2 brackets, 2 answers. Okay, now let's have a look at number 3. Alright, so number 3 is similar to number 2. All I have is 2 brackets, 1 bracket, second bracket, and then I have it equal to 0. Right, as soon as you have an x squared, it means you're going to have 2x answers. Or in this case, when you have 2 brackets, it means you're going to have 2 answers for x. Alright, my right hand side is already 0, so therefore I can just go and say, let me just quickly rewrite this. It was x plus 5. And in my other bracket I had 2x minus 3 equals to 0. So you're going to take your first bracket, put it equal to 0. And then you're going to take your second bracket and put it equal to 0. So I'm going to have x plus 5 equal to 0, or I'm going to have 2x minus 3 equals to 0. So what are you going to do now? You're going to take over this plus 5, and once I do that, we know it becomes negative 5, and 0 minus 5 is minus 5. This side I'm going to take over my minus 3 first, so it becomes 2x equals to positive 3. And then to get rid of my 2, I'm going to have to divide it, so I have x is equal to 3 over 2. There's your one answer, and there's your second answer. Now let's have a look at number 4. Alright, at number 4 I currently have 2x squared plus 8x plus 6 equals to 0. So the fact that there is now an x squared tells me that this here is going to be a quadratic equation, meaning that I'm going to have to get two x values. Now how do we do this? Well, the first thing is you have to get everything on the left hand side and your right hand side equal to 0. That step has already been done. Now your second step is you have to go and factorize. So let's have a look, at this one. Alright, so what type of factorization can I currently do here? Well, there I have a 2, there I have an 8, and there I have a 6. So we can take out a common factor of 2, which means if I take out my 2, I'm left with an x squared. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So I'm going to have a 4x, and then I have 6 divided by 2, which is 3. That's the first thing you can do. Alright, so now I'm going to just focus on my bracket. What type of factorization can I now do here? Well, this looks like a trinomial. So we're going to go and we're going to draw our table. If you're struggling with factorization, please go and watch my videos of the previous term where I did exam prep and I went through each method individually. Okay, but just a quick recap. When I am busy factorizing using trinomials, the first thing I have to look at is the sign. So if I have a plus, it means that both my signs have to be plus, or both my signs in my bracket have to be negative. Then the second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the factors of my first term. So what times what will give me x squared? My only option is x times x. So I'm going to put an x there, I'm going to put an x there. Then you're going to take your last term, which is 3, and I'm going to ask myself, what times what gives me 3? Now this is the easy one. I only have 1 times 3. So I'm going to put my 1 there, and I'm going to put my 3 there. And now I am going to cross multiply, meaning I'm going to say x times 3 gives me 3x, and I'm going to say x times 1 gives me x, or 1x, that's the same thing. Alright, now we must just decide, what am I going to do to make that a 4x? Am I going to make both signs positive, meaning I'm going to say 3x plus x, or am I going to make both signs negative, saying minus 3x minus x? Well, the one will give me 4x, and the other one will give me negative 4x, but I want positive 4x, so I'm going to make use of both being positive. So I'm going to put my positive there, and I'm going to put my positive there, and I'm going to put this into a bracket like that. Okay, so currently I'm going to have 2, I'm going to have a bracket with x plus 1, I'm going to have a bracket with x plus 3, and that is equal to 0. And now we're back to how it looked in question 2 and 3, where I have 2 brackets, and I have an equal to 0. This 2 is irrelevant, okay, because we cannot say that 2 is equal to 0. Alright, so we forget about a number. If it was an x, yeah, we would have also put it equal to 0, but if it's just a number, we don't do anything with it. Alright, so now we're going to take our first bracket, which is x plus 1. We're going to put it equal to 0, or we have our second bracket, which is x plus 3 equal to 0. Take over your plus 1, it becomes negative 1. Take over your 3, it becomes x equal to negative 3. And there's your two answers. So when it comes to equations, the most important thing is that you can identify which type of equation are you busy with. Are you busy with a linear equation, like we had in question 1? We just have a normal x, there's no there's not an exponent at the x, it's not an x squared or x to the power of 3, it's just an x to the power of 1. Then I know it's a linear. So you take everything, all the numbers to the one side, all the letters to the other side, and then you get your x alone. Whereas at number 2 and 3, I already factorized it. Okay, your two brackets, and they're already equal to 0, so you just take each bracket, put it equal to 0. Or your most difficult one, which is the number 4, you have an x squared, meaning it's a quadratic equation, and then you have to go and make brackets. Alright, so we have to go and factorize, and then once you have your two brackets, you can take your two brackets and put them also equal to 0.